think I'm pretty safe to say that he would be exceptionally proud. And I'd like to think he'd be even more aggressively pursuing his Métis heritage.
Because we're also called the forgotten ones, the Métis people.
We come from two cultures that need to come together, and that's what the culture of Métis is.
They really had a sense of community, and it just made me want to have a part of that.
Welcome to the first episode of MéTV. This initiative by Métis Nation British Columbia fulfills a collective need, cultural, spiritual, and practical. In this show, we will share our unique Métis culture with everyone. There is so much in our nation to be proud of. So much have the Métis given Canada, from our veterans to our music. Where are the Métis people of BC headed today? To discuss this and other important topics, I will chat with Lissa Smith, Acting President of MNBC. Lissa, welcome to MéTV.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and what an honor it is to be here and be part of the inaugural MéTV episode.
So Lissa, you've obviously seen a lot of transformations over the years. What are the couple that stand out to you during your term in office in terms of Métis Nation and our people?
Well, our nation certainly has grown, and very, very rapidly, just in a short time. And it seems that we're getting more recognition from the federal government and the provincial government. We're able to help our communities, which is really important. One thing that I've always felt strongly about is having regional hubs, and MNBC is able to start working on those and planning to have those established.
Can you tell our viewers what that means to you as a regional hub?
You know, the vision is to have employment and training in their registry, child and family worker, and any other community supports that our communities need. It's also a place where the Métis community could have office space, and also a cultural space for the entire region to use for cultural events. It's a gathering place. It's a place to call home.
So Lissa, you were a participant in the recent annual general meeting in British Columbia, and there was something pretty historic that happened. There was a declaration that got passed, a motion that got passed, a declaration on self-government. What do you see as some of the major challenges as Métis Nation British Columbia moves towards self-government over the coming years?
This motion, I believe it's historic, but it's also direction from our Métis citizens that this is where they want us to be going. So it shows government that we have support of our citizens in taking this on. The challenges that we faced, and I think the biggest things our citizens really do want is Section 35 harvesting rights. And that would include hunting and fishing and gathering, harvesting medicines and things like that. The other thing I consistently hear from Métis citizens is the need for extended health benefits. It's really upsetting at times when you hear from so many people that need dental work and can't afford to have that done. It is something that is a big need for our citizens.
So switching gears to a little bit on the lighter side, maybe outside the political world, Lissa, who do you look up to in the Métis community? Is there somebody that you've looked up to and you see as a mentor for you, somebody from within our Métis community that's helped you to better understand what being Métis is all about?
Sure, there's so many people. I just like to acknowledge all our elders, veterans in our Senate right now. One person in particular is a veteran. Her name is Barb Hume, and she works tirelessly in our community volunteering. We've had the opportunity to travel many times, and I really enjoy her company and her honest advice. And she's very straightforward, and she tells, expresses her opinion, and I found she's always pretty right. So Barb Hume, this is a shout out to you. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Now, switching back a little bit to recently, as the acting president, you oversaw the implementation and the approval of the operating budget for the Métis Nation of British Columbia. I think it was a record $79 million budget. Could you, for our viewers, what should they be expecting? Are there any highlights from that budget? Are there any investments that they should be looking for in the province of British Columbia as a result of the approval of that operating budget?
Certainly, there's so many new opportunities for Métis people in British Columbia. It's just so important that we've been able to provide funding to our communities. There's so many health initiatives going on, and one thing I've really admired from our health team, and our health team does an amazing job, is the mental health supports that we're able to provide to Métis people in British Columbia. We as leadership, of course, have a lot of concerns coming our way and positive things coming from our communities, but we were able to provide communities directly COVID funding, and the communities chose what best needs were in their own community, and they were able to help Métis citizens directly that way as well. I'm just very grateful to the province of BC for including us Métis people in this rollout.
Lissa Smith is the acting president for MNBC for Métis Nation British Columbia. Thank you so much, Lissa, for joining me on the inaugural episode of MéTV.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
On to the rest of the show. When we come back, we'll meet Darrell Fox, Terry Fox's younger brother.
It was interesting. People would just put Terry Fox on an envelope and it would find its way to the family home in Port Coquitlam.
Welcome back to MéTV. Many people go through their lives unsure about their family history. Some are lucky enough to learn about it later in life. Our roving reporter Sophie Gray caught up with Darrell Fox, Terry Fox's younger brother, to find out what it felt like to discover he is Métis.
Well, I was there. I joined up in St. John, New Brunswick on May 31st. So I missed the first 6 weeks and was there for the last 3 months.
Your family recently found out about their Métis heritage, and so I'm wondering if you could talk us through how that happened, how it came about that you found out about your Métis heritage.
Well, we always thought there was something there. I mean, you look at our grandma on my mother's side, and she looks First Nations. She has that appearance. But it was not something we discussed growing up.
Do you know why it wasn't talked about?
I think she was very uncomfortable discussing it because it just wasn't accepted back in her days. She grew up with that and the fact that she wasn't accepted, so it just wasn't discussed. Her personality mirrors Terry's. She was a hard worker. She was humble. All she did was give. She did not like accepting things. It was her way to nurture and help others, and that's kind of the person that Terry evolved into. Terry kicked off at a game between Ottawa and Saskatchewan, and he was really nervous for two reasons. One, kicking. He was really worried about that because he was really competitive. He wanted to make sure he kicked well. He didn't. The other thing he was concerned about was how would people respond, and he was worried that there wouldn't be much of a reaction. Well, he got a standing ovation, so it was really a sign of things to come.
How do you think Terry would have felt to know of his Métis heritage?
I'm always a little hesitant to speak on Terry's behalf. We operate now based on his vision and what he did share. But I think I'm pretty safe to say that he would be exceptionally proud. And I'd like to think he'd be even more aggressively pursuing his ancestry and his heritage, Métis heritage, if he were with us today. It was interesting. People would just put Terry Fox on an envelope and it would find its way to the family home in Port Coquitlam. That's all. That was the address.
Just Terry Fox.
Just Terry Fox, and that was enough. We were getting more. The family was getting more mail during that time than the whole city of Poco combined. It was absolutely incredible.
How are you sharing your Métis heritage with the next generation?
You know, every year we have an annual Terry Fox Run, and we have an annual Terry Fox Run t-shirt. And I'm so excited to be able to share that this year's design was created by a Métis artist. It'll share Terry's Métis heritage, so I'm exceptionally excited by that.
What does it mean to you to be Métis?
It fills a void, I think, for me. And even though I have so much to be grateful for, I'm Terry Fox's brother, and I've been able to be part of this incredible legacy, a very small part of this incredible legacy. But you always have these questions about who you are, and I have to accept that I did not grow up with it, and that's something that makes me a little uncomfortable with it, because I don't want to pretend to be someone I'm not.
And what's the discomfort? Where does that come from?
Well, just it's out of respect. I know, and I've met people who have been, you know, embracing their Métis culture for many years, decades. So that's why I need to indulge myself and understand more about what it is to be Métis. I'm pretty proud of what I found, and I look forward to finding out more going forward.
I'm not going to give up, and that's true. But I might not make it, and if I don't make it, the Marathon of Hope better continue.
No, it wasn't the way it was supposed to end, but you know, one of the first things Terry said, if I can get out there and finish the Marathon of Hope, I will. But if I can't, the run better continue. The Marathon of Hope better continue. Guess what? It has. You know, over the last 41 years, $850 million has been raised. So, you know, Terry passed the baton to all of us, and we're continuing to run and fulfill his dream of eradicating cancer. And we won't stop until that dream is realized. I'm Darrell Fox. I'm Terry Fox's younger brother, and I'm proud to be a member of the Métis Nation.
Joining me now is Sophie, our roving reporter. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Very well. So, Sophie, you're going to play a very unique role on MéTV this season. You're going to be out in the community. You're going to be out there across British Columbia getting to meet some very interesting Métis people. Tell us a little bit more about what you have planned this season.
Yeah, so it's really exciting. I'm going to try and make it to all 7 regions throughout the province, interviewing anyone from youth to you know, active artists in the community, creators, that sort of thing. Some important figures just to get to know what it's like to be Métis in these times.
So how can people get onto MéTV? Do you guys have an opportunity for feedback for people if they have a great idea, a great story idea they'd like to share with you?
Yeah, we'd love to hear that. The more we can incorporate the community, the better. So if you have stories that you think would fit well with our show here, we'd love to hear from you, and you can get in contact with us through our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can also contact the communications email, which is listed on the website as well.
Sounds great. Thanks so much. When we come back, renowned Métis artist Lissa Shepard walks with elder Philip Gladue.
Oh, no, sorry. We come from 2 cultures that need to come together, and that's what the culture of Métis is.
Welcome back. Lissa Shepard is an influential Métis artist from British Columbia. She will host regular segments on this show unearthing traditional knowledge during walks with elders throughout the province. She joins me now to tell us more. Welcome, Lissa.
Thank you, Daniel. It's good to be here.
So, Lissa, you're going to have a number of segments speaking with our elders this season. What do you want to explore? What would you like to talk with Métis elders across British Columbia?
So often we want to rush into gathering knowledge quickly. We're very keen to learn about our culture and to embrace our identity. But our elders, they have a lifetime of experience, and that takes time. And so we really are going to be given insight into ways of being that are just truly authentic.
Thank you, Lissa. Really looking forward to your segments this season. And now we're going to turn it over to you for your interview with Philip Gladue, an elder here in British Columbia.
Nimosum, I want to offer you some tobacco so that we can have a conversation in a really good way. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about our traditional ways of doing things.
Kinaskomten. Omakake koyaskum mujibita hamiksin. Igmitota manum mais ipixkota mahomaya. Pagmatahonno. And this tobacco, I'm going to put it on Mother Earth to say thank you for this day that we're having. Say thank you for the people that surround us, to support us to what we're going to do. No tawi. Tamino mutas. Kapmatos katama. Oma kisip matsia. Oma pitogos sana. Meitio kisika tagaw yakate. Iwanma. Ipaya. Ismaya. Tasawistami. Kohtawin o tapn sawim goya. Tapn sawi sakom kap mitahamiksia. Takegi goyota tapn skama. Tohtnama. Tapmaya. Snomoya ko. Oskayak. Uga. Ate kandawista ko. Tansomagi pisip matsia. Naskomona noskagisiga.
So Philip, you said some good words there. Can you share what you talked about, what you had to say?
Well, I said these words in the Cree Machif, the language that I actually speak. But what I said was here, when I offered the tobacco to the earth, back to the earth, to give thanks for this day, to give thanks for what is happening here today, to be able to pass our knowledge on, having you interviewing me today, and hopefully that this continues on with our nation as Métis people, and not to forget Kihtiayak, the old ones. That's what we call elders in our language.
Kihtiayak.
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 Yeah.
This, what you just did, this is ceremony that you just did. And you know, we have lots of people that are on their journey with understanding their identity, and lots of people with questions about ceremony and how are we going to pass that on to next generations?
We have to understand what a ceremony is. And our whole life is ceremony. In our ways, the old ways, we didn't have a special day for certain things to happen in a calendar year. It was every day. Every day we gave thanks. So that's what I say, ceremony is ongoing all the time, as long as we understand and connect to it in a spiritual sense. And I want to say for us, Apistogos Sanak, and that's coming from the Cree language. It means half and half, basically.
Yes.
And which is very, very connected. We come from two different cultures. We come from two cultures that need to come together, and that's what the culture of Métis is. Combining the two so that we can walk in both worlds.
Yeah, I think that's just such good advice, you know, for our young people. People come to me new on their journey and saying, you know, I'm Métis as well, but I'm only 20%. You know, and it's that idea that's been passed down that we're a small part of something else, or that we're a percentage of something else. You know, and I think that's not true. You know, we're whole people. You know, Nimosum, the whole time that we were doing that, my mind was going 100 miles a minute thinking, oh, we were going to take off our masks and you didn't. And people are going to look at it and say, why isn't she wearing a mask around her elder? What is she thinking?
You know, I could suggest or give you some feedback on that, is that, you know, don't worry about it.
I know when I hear the language spoken, the first time I heard you speak the language, I don't know if I ever told you this, I started to cry because I don't know, it just felt so familiar, and and I didn't grow up with the language. And honestly, it's one of just a sad point that, to not grow up with the language, because I wish that I had. But when first time I heard you speak the language, oh boy, it tugged at the heartstrings. Come and join me, Nimosam. You talk about the continuation of culture and where it comes from, and what you shared with me today, and and are sharing with everybody through that. Once we have this knowledge that you've shared, we carry it for our lifetime. And with every new bit of knowledge that we get, we see the world in a different way. And it's like a veil is lifted and we see things more clearly, and we carry that for our lifetime. And so I think reciprocity is really important. And so I made these for you.
Oh.
Because Nimosam, you've helped me to walk such a good path.
You did a nice job here, and we'll keep them and share them. And so it's very nice. Thank you so much.
It is crucial that we learn from traditional Métis knowledge and wisdom, especially in these uncertain times. Learning from the past while gaining new knowledge is something we can all aspire to. We'll be right back with a discussion on discrimination in the healthcare system. But first, did you know the Michif word for knowledge? A recent report by former Judge Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond discovered that 84% of Indigenous people face racism while accessing healthcare in BC. I'm joined today by Charlene Austin and Christine Sorensen to discuss equitable access to healthcare in Canada. I want to thank both you, Charlene, and Christine, for joining me today here on the inaugural episode of MéTV. And Christine, I do note that you are wearing a sash, so you are a very proud Métis person, and you also are the head of a very large union here in British Columbia, the BC Nurses Union. So have some of your members been bringing these issues of racism to your attention? And also, what are you doing about it as a union?
So unfortunately, yes, I do hear from my members. I do hear about racism that happens in healthcare. We are no different than society as general. We're just a microcosm of society. Unfortunately, racism against patients is not the only type of racism we hear. Indigenous healthcare workers report that they are victims of racism, and sometimes even between healthcare workers. So there is a real need to create a psychologically healthy and safe working environment within healthcare, to create a safe place for people to come and receive the care that they need. This has been an issue for our organization for a long time. We have, it's been well over 15 years that we established our Human Rights and Equity Caucuses. We have an Indigenous Leadership Circle that helps guide our organization and our policies and procedures. And we have been reaching out to the government and saying we need to do things differently, and we're happy to assist in that process and help you guide in your policies. We have Indigenous leaders that can help with this.
And Charlene, you've obviously, like I said, got an interesting perspective on this, and there are a lot of players in the system. There is labor, there's the health authorities, there's the ministries of health, etc. Are each of the players, in your opinion, are they doing enough? Are we doing enough collectively to tackle and to address the issue of systemic racism in the Canadian healthcare system?
I would jump onto Christine's point to say that there's an increase in allies reaching out on this issue, and people are being more vocal on the issue. I think one that comes to mind when I read Dr. Turpel-Lafond's report, and there was one of the interviewees who spoke up about feeling unsafe entering into the healthcare system because of not trusting in management. And we really do have to build trust in the system. And, you know, I think about the Canadian College of Health Leaders, and they're right now trying to weave a thread, an Indigenous thread internally and externally to promote cultural humility and cultural safety, both in staff and in members. I do think that there are people that are more willing to address this issue. I still think there's a lot of work to be done.
And you did mention the report that was issued by Dr. Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond, a well-known advocate, children and family advocate here in British Columbia. That report came out in the fall of 2020, and it was quite an incredible compilation of stories, very, very moving for anyone who's read that in terms of the issue of systemic racism in healthcare. So I'm going to put this first question to you, Christine. Have you actually, I'm assuming you have read the report, and what do you actually think of the findings from that report? And do you think that a report like that will actually move the needle and make a difference, not only here in British Columbia, but perhaps across Canada?
Yes, I have read the report. I read it in detail. I read it 2 or 3 times. I also had the privilege of having a one-on-one session with Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond to discuss her findings and to discuss how the BC Nurses Union, the 48,000 nurses that I represent, could help to move these initiatives, recommendations forward. BCNU did come out and we endorsed all of the recommendations. We felt all of them were important and needed to be implemented as soon as possible. One of them that was of concern to me was the fact that she recognized that nurses felt intimidated and were not able to speak out and be vocal around racism that they have experienced or witnessed. And that she felt it was critical that health authorities create whistleblower protection programs, institute the Personal Disclosure Act, which protected nurses and others in healthcare to bring forward these.
So as we record this episode, across Canada, in fact, across the world, we're dealing with the COVID pandemic. So we're dealing with a global pandemic which is impacting Indigenous peoples, not only across British Columbia, across Canada, across the world. How do you think systemic racism is impacting the response to the pandemic?
I do think that the pandemic has certainly highlighted again the inequities that are faced by Indigenous people. We do know that many who live in rural and remote communities, particularly in the north, have been extremely hard hit, which is why the targeted approach by our public health officer to focus on our rural and remote and our Indigenous communities, simply because they are at much higher risk. But I am grateful that as many people as possible have accepted the vaccine to this point, and we'll continue to work to bring that vaccine to as many Indigenous people as we can.
So we've got very limited time left, and I just have one final question for the both of you. If you could identify a couple of things, just a couple of things that are barriers for Métis people to access healthcare in Canada, in British Columbia, what would those 2 things be? Perhaps I'll start with you, Charlene.
In order to really accomplish good health outcomes, we need good data. And we recognize that in order to have substantial equality in Canada for Indigenous people, data is important, and we're still lacking it. And the report recognized that. And
Christine, over to you. Just a couple of, we've got only about 30 seconds left. Sorry about the timing, but a couple of key issues before we wrap up.
Well, Charlene, certainly I targeted 2 that I absolutely support. As a Métis woman myself, I still have to continue to explain to people that I too am Indigenous. So one of the barriers is, I think, that the understanding that Métis people in Canada are Indigenous peoples of Canada and should have the same rights and inherent rights as all other Indigenous people. But I also believe we need to look at how to take healthcare to Indigenous people rather than bring Indigenous people to the healthcare system.
On that note, thank you both very much for participating in this very important panel discussion today, and also for participating in the inaugural MéTV episode. Thank you both. When we come back, the Métis carver who made this cart discusses his craft and identity.
And I find myself imagining my ancestors and what were they doing in that moment.
This Red River cart is a quintessential part of Métis history. Sophie caught up with the carver who built it at his workshop in Port Coquitlam.
Okay, I got this, and I wonder if I got a scrap of wood around, I can make a quick meal. Okay, I'll start with that, and then I'll go like this. Carving helps me connect incredibly because it's really difficult. So making a wheel or any kind of this stuff with hand tools is super hard. And I find myself imagining my ancestors and what were they doing in that moment, because they didn't have this tool, they had some other tool they probably made or it wasn't as good. When they're frustrated, there's no one to ask. How do you overcome the situation? So you needed a piece, you find a tree or a branch, and you pull your hand tools out and you carve a wooden nail. Okay, let's try that. Like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's a nail, right?
So every single one.
Yeah, well, if you're paying me to make you a traditional cart,
yeah,
I'm going to use hand tools and I'm going to use as much of the original process as I physically can, right?
What got you into carving?
So my ancestors are Métis, and they used to make all kinds of really awesome things like Red River carts and boats and stuff. And one of the local Métis groups called me and asked if I could figure out how to make a Red River cartwheel. So I managed to figure it out with my hand tools. Now I've built like 30 of them. So this is my first mallet that I made. So the very first Red River cart that I made, I was using hand tools, so I wanted to use a handmade hammer. So that's a piece of alder from my wood pile and a piece of spruce and little wooden nails in there. And it's cracked, and it's been cracked ever since the very beginning. But it's built every single cart, and it's just been so much work. It's probably my most, if I lost this tool, I would be devastated.
Did you always know you were Métis?
When I was growing up, we were Cree. We thought we were Cree, which we are. There is some Cree, but there's Iroquois as well. One of my cousins bought me a book about the history of my family. Right on the cover, here's my great-great-great-grandfather, a drawing of him, and he's got a sash on. So I knew right there. I was like, okay, well, that's a sign.
And do you think about your ancestors a lot when you're carving?
Totally, I think about them all the time. When I was building the boat, I was like calling to them, like, you know, literally naming them, you know, like, Johnny, you know, what do I do? How do I get this rib of the boat to bend? Because it's been 2 weeks and I've broken like 30 of them now and I don't know what to do. And so you just, next thing you know, an idea comes to you and you try it and it works. It seems crazy, but it actually works, right? Just like a finger joint. And then you just drill a couple of holes and you put some wooden nails.
You said like imperfections in the wheels and stuff is how they always were. And I was told that they didn't ever grease the wheels either.
That's right.
And it made a sound.
So yes, it totally does. So if you put grease in there, dust and dirt will get in there and it'll eat the hub and stuff way faster. So we just use it wood on wood and it would sound crazy loud. They called it the Fiddle of the West in the old days because it sounded like you hear a bunch of them coming and it sounded like whining fiddles.
Yeah.
Everything kind of falls away and you're just in that moment and you're pulling a tool through a piece of wood and it's something that's hard to explain. You just have to feel it.
And then just push.
There you go.
Yeah, cool.
Fall through, right?
It's hard to get the pressure.
That is the hardest for people. So you gotta try to keep it straight too, right? So it's like, yeah. Try to get a level on it. So on top of just trying to use it, it's hard because you gotta try to, like if you're trying to make something that's really good and you're trying to drill straight holes, on top of just using it, you're trying to keep it straight, right? That's a challenge. It's hard, man.
And why do you think it's so important to take these things back to teach them to future generations?
Well, it was because it wasn't passed on because of we were at that time. It wasn't, you weren't proud. It was like my dad grew up not being proud to be Métis or First Nations. I just saw that opportunity to kind of take the culture back for us. Super important for me to pass that on to my children so that we're not forgotten, because we're also called the forgotten ones, right? The Métis people. Getting that back, I feel like we're not being forgotten. My name is Pat Calihou, and I am a member of the Métis Nation of British Columbia.
Sophie, that was an amazing segment with Pat. Great to see you focusing on Métis artists. What's your one takeaway after you had a chance to meet with Pat and the amazing carver?
My one takeaway would be just that how amazing it is that this carving allows him to connect to his Métis heritage. The tradition and the history and the culture that come through is so evident in Pat's work and in what he says, and it's just an inspiration.
And I see that you're an aspiring artist as well. I saw you getting your hands dirty there trying to do some work. What do you feel you're becoming closer to being a Métis artist yourself?
Definitely not. I mean, I'm not Métis myself, and I am not a carver, that's for sure. They cut out the parts where he had to help me do all of those things. So using those old-fashioned tools is way harder than he makes it look, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you, Sophie. When we come back, we meet Canada's first ever Métis federal minister, Gerry St.
When I got into politics, I realized then that I could possibly make a difference.
Welcome back. My next guest has led a rich and eventful life that has seen him wear a police uniform in Vancouver's downtown east side and taken him to Parliament Hill in Ottawa, where he was the first Métis to become a federal minister and senator. Here to talk about his life and his Métis identity is Gerry St. Thank you very much, Gerry, for joining me today on the inaugural episode of MéTV. I'm very pleased to have you, very honored to have you on the program. Now, you've been in the Senate and you've been parliamentarian, and you've kind of watched as Indigenous rights have changed a lot, I'm sure, over the time that you were in public office. What has it been like? Tell us, as a Métis person, what's it been like to witness those changes firsthand and that fight for Métis rights at the federal level? And then I might get you to comment a little bit even here at the provincial level. But what was it like at the federal level when people were fighting for basic Métis rights?
Well, I even recall in 1984 when then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney offered the First Nations, the Indigenous people, self-government, and they declined to accept it at the time. I was in a good position as a member of Parliament and as a cabinet minister to have a certain amount of influence. But when I became a senator, I was put immediately onto the Aboriginal Committee. And at that time, we were making slow progress. So I saw the evolution through various governments, levels of government in the 19 years I was in the Senate. And I ended up chairing that committee in the last 7 years. There's a long way to go. And it's, as they say, it's 40 miles into the bush. You got to get turned around, and it's 40 miles out. And I think that Indigenous people are at the turnaround point.
Now, Gerry, you know full well that many Métis aren't aware of their Métis heritage until later in life. Like myself, there are so many Métis people in the same boat as I. But you grew up in the homeland, so you grew up there. What was that like? Let our viewers know a little bit about what that was like, and how do you keep your connections to your Métis heritage so strong even to this day?
What comes back to me, Daniel, when I'm thinking of it, I always sort of saw myself as a child of a lesser God. That factor drove me to wanting to see us take our rightful place in society and not be children of a lesser God, and to be part and parcel of the entire Canadian mosaic. And we weren't at the time. I can recall my father going to the bank and being told they would lend him money if he hadn't been an Indigenous person.
No, those are excellent comments, and it really is a time for our people, not only here in British Columbia, but across Canada. So many Métis people are speaking out, and this is a great example of that. MéTV is the opportunity for us to showcase some of the amazing things that Métis people are doing right across British Columbia. But perhaps my last question to you, and I couldn't let you go without asking you to comment and perhaps give our viewers your perspective on the current political climate here in British Columbia and in Canada.
Politics are the same. It doesn't matter who's in government. Historically, they've failed to meet up with the challenges. They've failed to listen to our Aboriginal peoples. And they've failed because they never let our Indigenous people take control of their own destiny. And until you can control your own destiny, you're not going anywhere. And that is the biggest error, the paternalistic aspect of all governments. We're going to do this for you, we're going to do that for you, instead of going to the Indigenous people and saying, what do you need?
So Gerry, before we wrap up the show, I really want to give you the opportunity. I know there was a book written about you, and perhaps let our viewers know a little bit more about that book and maybe where they can get access to it.
Well, it's available, I hate to say this, through Amazon and Indigo. I think a lot of the bookstores have it. But the book is I Am a Métis was written by Peter O'Neill, the editor-in-chief of the Vancouver Sun, who followed my career in the Senate and had actually followed me when I was a cabinet minister as a member of Parliament. And I wanted the book named From Dirt Floors to the Senate Floor, and simply because my great-grandmother had a dirt floor in her house, and I asked her one day why she was sweeping the floor, and she looked at me in disgust. She says, because it's dirty, and I said, it's a dirt floor. And she said, Kukam said to me in French, get out of here, you little devil. And it's remarkable when you think of the good fortune I've had. Only in Canada could you go from dirt floors to the Senate floor. And thank you to people like Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. And I thank you, Dan, for the interview, and God bless all of you. And let's continue to work to improve the plight of our people.
Well, thank you so much, Gerry, for being on the show today on our inaugural program. And I encourage everyone to grab a copy of the book. It's a great book. It's a great story about a Métis leader, a very senior, prominent leader within Canada. Thank you so much, Gerry Saint-Germain, for being on the program today. And hopefully, once COVID is over, we'll have an opportunity to see each other in person once again. Thanks so much.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
We're taking a short break. When we come back, we look to the future with hope.
Grade 9 was kind of a turning point for me, so I found out my heritage, and that was also when my back injury started.
Welcome back. On MéTV, we will regularly feature Métis youth from different regions of British Columbia, learning about their goals, aspirations, and challenges. Sophie met up with Annalee Wells, who is blending her heritage with her education.
My dad was talking to my mom and said, well, should we get them status cards? And I said, status cards for what? And he said, you do realize you're like Indigenous. I am right there.
So when you were in grade 9, that's when you found out you were Métis?
Yes, so grade 9 was kind of a turning point for me. So I found out my heritage, and that was also when my back injury started. I had a slip disc in my back, which caused it to press on a nerve that went all the way down my leg. It was chronic pain for 3 years, and I still played basketball. I still went to school for 6 hours. After basketball, it just hurt so much more, but I wanted to keep playing.
She was a very courageous young lady, I think, to keep trying so hard even all through this. And it's too bad. I think if we could have had her on our team last year, I think we'd have far greater success. And I think, I think it was really kind of sad that she couldn't participate with us.
I got corrective surgery and I'm fixed now, but I couldn't finish my senior year of basketball. Feel a bit weird? Yeah, last time I was in here and I didn't think that was going to be my last time. So this was the start and end of my basketball career. All happened in this little circle. My very first game was played here. I remember coming into this circle. I had no idea what I was doing. I had an advantage because I was very tall compared to the other girls, so I won the tip-off, and that was the start of my basketball career here. Yeah, so there's us. This is when we went to Hawaii. I'm right there.
Well, we played that game at the Hawaii Pacific, or Hawaii Baptist School.
Some of the girls on the teams were talking about they were Native, and none of them knew about Native American culture. I think I asked them and they had no clue, but I think there was sort of a understanding when I did tell them what it was, that we also got colonized, we also are not connected to our culture, and there was sort of that understanding. Now that I didn't have basketball distracting me, I needed something else to kind of latch onto, and that's where my Métis culture took place, I remember this powwow.
I think when you know where you come from, there's a sense of belonging, similar to a team or a family, and you see that in the school with the students who are involved in what we do here, that maybe outside of our activities, everybody's an individual, but when we come together as a group, it's like a small little community within the school.
What's your heritage?
I'm Métis.
Métis as well?
Yes. But I never grew up with any sort of culture, so it was only when I started working as an Aboriginal youth worker that I started looking more into my heritage. It's a good connection with the students who are just learning to be learning together.
I think this was one of the first powwows I actually ever attended, and it was just really cool. And I remember, I think I helped set up one of their booths, and he had the blankets, and I think he said to me, if you help set up my station, I'll give you a blanket for 50% off, but I was like, I know, I'll just help you.
They're always hustling.
Yeah. This is the Métis booth. There's the flag there. There's some sashes. And I think I bought my very first sash here, actually. I think my mom bought it for me. They really had a sense of community, and it just made me want to have a part of that.
Annalee is attending the Sauder School of Business at the University of British Columbia.
Now that I'm at UBC, I have a group of friends there now, and we're sort of starting our own little community of Indigenous kids, and that really helped me move on from the sadness that I couldn't play basketball to sort of hope for the future. And my future doesn't include basketball, but it includes something else that's a lot more important to me, I think. I'm Annalee Wells, and I'm proud to be Métis.
Sophie, what an amazing story, an amazing individual with Annalee. It was interesting to see in her story that she discovered that she was Métis not at birth, but a little bit later in life. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was very interesting, and from what I hear, pretty common. She found out that she was Métis when she was about 15 years old. So her mother had actually told her and her brother when she was younger that they had Indian heritage, but didn't explain any further, and Annalee always assumed that it was East Indian heritage. But she found out when she was 15 and her brother was 18 and he was applying to university that it was actually Métis heritage that they had. And so she's been trying to figure that out and really jumped in with 2 feet into trying to figure out her Métis identity and what that means to her.
Well, congratulations to Annalee. She's got an amazing story, and thank you, Sophie, for sharing that with our audience. When we come back, we'll wrap up the show. I hope you enjoyed our premiere episode of MéTV. In our Métis Nation of BC, there are so many stories to tell, and I can assure you, we will be visiting your region soon to showcase talents, culture, and arts from your community. This show is all about Métis in BC, and if you feel that there is a story to tell in your community, get in touch with us through our social media pages. You can also watch full versions of interviews with our guests on MNBC's website. I will see you next week. Until then, Mina Kawapamitin.